Hello, I'm Li Hao. So today I'm going to talk about a library called svelte-knobby. It's a library that adds a floating panel that allows you to tune your application, right? So oftentimes you have a scenario where you're not sure what's a color about, what's a nice best color, what's a nice best padding or height, or what's the best text that you should have on your website. You can add this panel, which is draggable, and you can change the value dynamically to modify your application. So it's a good thing where if you are trying to change like the values, show or hide a certain panels and things like that. Great thing for you to do is that sometimes it's hard to change certain things on your code, and then you have to re-render or refresh or have to go through steps to reach that point of the application and see it reflected. So having this floating panel around where you can tweak inner attributes or properties of your component directly makes it easy for you to develop, right? Or to tune your website. So today what we are going to do is we are going to figure out how we can implement this library. So here is the final result. This is what we have. It's floating-ish. It's not draggable, but take a look at this. I can change the value from here, from the inside of the panel. I can show or hide new panel, and I can click and update the inner value, right? So I can click from inside, update the value from the outside, as well as modifying the value from the inside. How cool is that? So that's what we're going to take a look at how we're going to implement in this video. The first thing I will usually do to try to understand a bit more about a component is try to play around with it. I'll try to probe and to use it in a way that it wasn't documented on the demo or maybe in the tutorials, right? So in this case, for this knobby component, what I'm going to try to do is, first thing I want to figure out how does calling this panel will create this panel for us. Right, because in the example it says that if you if you check on this checkbox, you see additional component being rendered and this is being added. But once it's being unmounted, it's gone. So top of my head, there's two ways to do it. Right, first of all is probably it's done through the lifecycle event. So maybe knobby.panel when you call knobby.panel. Inside it, it's using an onMount and onDestroy to add a new panel or hide a panel, right? In that case, then knobby.panel would not be able to use in outside of the Svelte component initialization. You would have to use within a Svelte component initialization, because in only that point you can use onMount or onDestroy, right? So that could be one. And another idea I have would be, maybe it's based on whether this variable is being subscribed to it, because when you unmount the thing or you mount it, you start to using these variables, right? So once you start using a dollar prefix of this store variable, you are subscribing the store, and once it's unmount, it's unsubscribing from that store. So maybe it's based on the subscription of a store that's being returned. So for that case, we can try maybe comment out all the place we are using the store. And yes, I'm right. So in this case, you don't see anything at all, right? I can still log out the control stores. I can still print out the store, or I could use import get from Svelte store, right? And I can get the value of the controls, but you don't see any panel, right? So doing this is actually tries to JSON.stringify. When you do this, is that it will quickly subscribe to the store and unsubscribes it. In that case, I would imagine that there will be no panel at all. But of course, you don't see any sections anymore, right? Because it's when it subscribes from it, it will remove. Right, so meaning as soon as there's one subscription before, then you will see this panel, right? So that's roughly we know. Most likely this is using the subscription rather than on mount or on destroy lifecycle. Okay, let's undo all this. Let's try and see what else we can play around. Right here it says the return writable. Okay, so you can change the content of store directly from outside like this, right? So in that, like on clicks and stuff like that. So does that means that and when you click this, you will change the panel itself, right? The value that is showing on the panel, and so it's a store. It syncs both ways, right? So, but what if I try to maybe set the value of the stores, but of something that is not a field that is not configured previously, right? Say maybe hello equals to hello. If I do that, I don't see a new sections added. So probably this section is created based on these options over here, and you can't create new fields. Let's see, if I try JSON stringify the whole store, and well, you don't see hello as well, right? So if you do it this way, you don't, it's not added to the store as well. Okay, so maybe one more thing that I'll try to do. Say if I input bind value equals to controls dot hello. Okay, where's my input? Whoops. I think I should wrap this around div. With is it? I'm not quite good at CSS. I think I can do this. Okay, now if I change something on a hello, I should see it here, right? So initially, even if I set it to hello to a string hello, somehow this is still an empty string. Right, you see here, this I binds the value but it's still an empty string. So something interesting happening over here. I'm not sure why. But if I try to change, now I see my hello with the updated value. Okay, but I'm still not seeing the hello options in here in the panel. So yeah, this confirms that this section, all the fields over here are created only based on these options, right? And you can't add new sections. At least not from the store directly. You can't add new sections. Let's try. Wait. So if I try to tick on something, or when I try to make changes to this, right? So I'm not sure you noticed. I type something on hello, and if I try to change something over here, apparently like the store value is recreated in a way that is recreated based on all the options. Meaning this will be gone because it's not from this, right? So changing from outside or changing from the inside of the panel is different, right? Changing from outside panel, you can modify the store directly, right? You can modify a store directly, and whatever you add, it will be added to a store. But from the inside, if you're going into the store, going to the knobby panel, and you're trying to change something, it kind of recreates the store object in a way that any fields that is not based on this options are being removed, right? It feels like it's regenerated based on all the fields that it has in the panel, right? It does not like modifies it. It does not go to the message and modify the message field only. It's kind of like recreates. Okay, that's my feeling. I'm not sure whether that's how it's being implemented, but at least based on playing around with this, you feel that it's not modifying the message field, but it's like recreate a new object with all the fields value, right? So I guess let's see what else we can play with it. But I think that's all for kind of understanding how the implementation is kind of. So I think it gives me an idea of like how this is. Most of all, it gives me a very clear idea of when I should add a panel, which is based on subscription, right? So let's try and get started. So here I've set up a very bare bones SvelteKit project. So it's a skeleton project. I have nothing in it. So first thing I'm gonna do is let me clear. Let me refresh this. Let me copy everything in. So I'm gonna copy this, and the thing.svelte. So I'm gonna say new folder thing.svelte. And now let's start the server. Yarn start. Wait, yarn dev. Sorry. It should be a thing.svelte. And we don't have svelte-knobby yet, right? So we are going to create it. So I'm going to come in here and create a folder called lib svelte-knobby, and I'm creating a first file svelte. This is svelte, and make sure it works. Let me just export the same function first. Export function. Oh wait, this should be a JavaScript. Export function panel, and let's see. And it should return a star. So let me get a star, writable, return a writable star. Okay, now I need to import from this knobby that's written implemented locally in a lib folder. Okay, let's try run again. And there we have it. Whoops. What's wrong? Did I spell something wrong? Oh, okay. Svelte-knobby. Okay. Now we have our basic setup with nothing implemented on the lib folder yet. Nothing implemented yet. So let's get started. So here we have our panel that can take in options, right? And it should return a writable star. And we figured that whenever there's someone is subscribing to it, it should render a panel. So that's what we're gonna do, right? So before we move forward, maybe let me tell you my plan first. Plan of attack, right? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna dynamically render a panel. So at least we can show a panel when something is subscribing to it. And then the next thing we're gonna settle once that we got that done, we're gonna try to dynamically render the panel options based on the options as it pass into the knobby panel. So we're gonna add all these input fields and stuff like that. Okay, so once that's done, then we need to make sure that the star value, the star that's written as the value is being able to control from within the panel. And lastly, we make sure that from outside the panel, we can also sync it back to the panel itself, right? So it goes both ways. You can change the value from the outside, from the inside of the panel, and you can also change the value from the outside of the panel, right? So I'm gonna earmark this section, all these steps, right? So dynamic render, having the options, update the store value, update store value from outside, all of them in the sections in this video. So if you want to jump ahead, you are curious on certain parts, you just go down there and click on them. Right, so the first thing we're gonna do is dynamically render a panel when you are being subscribed to it. Right, so I did a tutorial on a writable star. Talked about that before already. So if you're interested, links on the tutorial video for this in the description. So writable takes in two options. First one is the value of the star, value of the writable star, the initial value, and the second option is actually a callback, where this callback will be called when you have your first subscription, right? So this is kind of like a setup function, right? If you have the second subscription, the subsequent subscriber try to subscribe to it, this function will not be called anymore. So this is the setup, right? Only when there's a subscriber. And it can return a function that will be called, this is like a destroy. So once someone is unsubscribes from this store, and nothing happened, but only until the last subscribers unsubscribes from it, then this will be called. So this is like, oh, no one is subscribing to me anymore, then I should call this function. So here is where I would be taking care of cleaning up the panel, so I don't show any panel, or I remove the panel. Right, so here, what we need to do is add a new section to the panel, right? Or remove the section from the panel, right? So let's start with creating a panel first, right? So panel will be a component, panel.svelte. And I'm going to say this is a panel. And I'm going to import this panel component. Okay, and to create a new panel, I'm gonna add it to the document body. So I'm gonna mount a component on the body. So I say panel equals to new panel, and the target would be the document.body. Right, and when I remove it, I will say panel.destroy. Okay. So now you see that this is a panel. We are seeing a panel now. So here, in the meantime, I haven't have any store value yet. So I'm gonna have maybe like a checkbox input. Type checkbox. Oops, what is this? Bind check. And I use this variable to control my component first until I have my store value correctly. Right, so I'm gonna need to define this. Let's check box. No, check. Right, and usually it's false. Okay, so first of all, I need to make sure that because of how SvelteKit works, all components are being server-side rendered. Right, if I refresh this, you realize that on the server side, when I call knobby panel, I'm gonna mount something on the body, but which means on the server side it does not work because server side does not have a document of body. So I'm gonna say no server side. So SSR equals to false. Let me try refresh it. Okay, now we only do it on client side. So here I have a panel. If I click the checkbox, you see that I have this panel. I have two panels now. If I uncheck, only back to one, right? So here we have we create a new panel and we destroy a panel when we no longer need it, right? So we need to style our panels a bit. I'm gonna create a div class equals to panel. And let's see that style panel. And let's see, we have a position. So I'm not gonna do like a draggable panel. So all my panels are always stuck at the top right corner. I'm gonna use a position fix, top equal 10 pixel, right equals to 10 pixel, maybe a bit of padding, 8 pixel, maybe some nice border radius, 8 pixel, background color will be light gray. And let's see, like one last thing. Maybe I should add some border. Okay, border 1px solid gray. Okay, let's try see. Okay, this is a panel. Good enough for me. If I click, okay, because both panels will add on the top right corner, so it's overlapping each other. So if you try to inspect element, probably see two panels, but they are on the same position. That's why you don't see them clearly. But if you come over here, when you add more things, it's actually on the same panel. It's just two sections of the panel. Right? This is one, and there's two sections. So I think we should only have one panel component. So I'm gonna come over here and create like a one panel component. Let panel and. So I only need to create it when I need it, right? So I'll say create. Let's see. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. Okay, let's do this. So I'm gonna copy all this thing in. So the panel itself is gonna have a props called. Or variable called sections, right? So here I should push to this sections array to have more sections. So something would look like this: sections as section. This is a section. Okay, so I'm gonna add or remove items from this section. So from here, I need to get this panel, and I need to find a way to add sections to it. Alright, so one quick way I can think of is I can create a method for this section, for this component. So add section will be, this dot section is no, what's this? Sections dot push section, and sections equals section. And I need to I also should remove it, remove section. So this would be sections dot splice, sections dot index of. So I need to find the index of the section and remove one item from that index, right? Okay, so here I adding and removing the sections from this array. So here I need to come over here and say panel dot add new section, right? So add section and remove section. So let me create a section first. For now, it's just gonna be like an object, maybe like a empty object. So add section and remove section. So this, make sure that this are referring to the same section object so that it can be removed. The same thing, right? So let me try and refresh again. Okay, panel. Okay, I shouldn't use the same variable. So I'm gonna call this panel with an underscore. Again, document is not defined. Oh well, now I'm using document here instead of function, right? Which means that whenever because this is being imported directly into the file, right? So this line is evaluated on the modules when it's being imported, right? When we do this SSR to prevent, we're not allowing to execute anything. We don't run like all this code over here because we don't have to render the component, but we still import the panel. We still import this knobby module, and because by importing this, we are executing this line and document is not defined, right? So maybe I can let's panel, and then if I check if it's in browser, then only I create this panel, right? And I can get this to know whether I'm in a browser. I can check this from app.env, right? So whether this environment is a browser environment. I think this is good enough for me. Let's try. Why there's two panels? Why is that two? I'm not quite sure. I've been refreshing a few times, but I'm not sure why there's two panels over here. There should be one. This is a section. Probably some sort of weird CSS styling. Why is there two panel component when I only created one? Let me restart the server. I feel there's something wrong over here. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why something went wrong. But just ignore that. Okay, so now I create a section. I'm using a component methods to do it. When I click, I have new sections, right? If I unclick, I remove that sections, right? So there's actually a few ways to do this. Although I jumpstart to say, okay, maybe we do it on a methods, right? Another way of doing this is maybe without using a method, you can actually create a store that has create a store. Create a writable store, which is a sections, and then we import that store in both the panel and in this knobby code. So from here, we can add or remove sections. And here because we subscribe to the store, we can show or hide that sections, right? So let me quickly do that so that you can see how it's being done. Export cont sections goes to writable sections, right? So I'm using a store in this case, and here instead of creating my sections variable, I use sections. So this is a store now. That's it, and I can remove these two functions and come over here and do it over here diagonally. So here I would say, let me import the stores sections. I would use sections. So this is a store, right? So I need to use the update function. So this is the original section. So this is the store value, and I'm gonna say sections.push that section and return the store value. Same thing here. I'm gonna move this part in. So this is to remove the section, right? Let me try and remove all this, clean it up, and yep. So here, instead of using a component method, we use a store, right? We push or remove things to the store, and just to show you that it works. Oh, wait, hold on. I think still missing something. Okay, here. Okay. Whoops. Sections. Oh, there should be an array. Okay. So here, when I add or remove, it still works the same way, right? Okay, so now we have a dynamic sections being added or removed on demand when you're subscribing to the store and unsubscribes. Next thing we're gonna do is render the options. So first of all, let's take a look at this demo over here. What are the options that you could pass into the knobby panel? Right, you can have a label, which is a dollar label. So I believe this is a special variable. And then you have fields, right? So message will create a message input, color will color input, and it is based on the value itself will create a different kind of input, right? So the string will create a text input, a number will create a number input, a boolean will create a checkbox, a function will create a button, and then you can have like a special objects with a value option, and you can have folders, right? So here we are trying to, these are the options that you pass in a panel, right? But I don't think this is easy for us to dynamically render the panel itself, right? I want to get this, so from this, let me show you what I'm trying to say. So here I have sorry. So here, let me set things up a bit. Okay, so this is the options, right? This is the options object that the demo says what you can configure, and I want to generate like I want to transform this into some sort of a description of that makes it easy for me to render the options, right? So what I mean is that I want to have something maybe that looks like this, right? Because it could be a folder, it could be not a folder, right? I think I should normalize everything to maybe like an object that says if this is a folder, maybe true or false, and the value itself, right? And also the type of the value and the type of the input. Right, so for example, for message, this thing, I want it to become something where I have the type equals to string, the value equals to hello world, and probably folder equals to false, right? Or maybe without folder equals to false, I still know that this is not a folder, right? As long as it's not true, it's definitely false. So for constraint, it will be something similar, right? Maybe like a label value type is number, right? And then we have some other options. So here, okay, so here we can customize a label, right? Maybe here I also need a label field that says this is a message, right? And for folders, I would need to be folder equals to true, right? Folder, true. And then there's also a label for the folder. This is the label folder. And then it will be a list of options within the folder itself. Right? So here I can have like a values, which is a list itself. Which is a list. And here I can have, so this A is the number, right? So there will be something similar to this, where I will transform it to a label to be A, type to be number, and value to be 1, right? So you can see here, I cherry pick some of the things, but this whole objects itself, like the root objects itself, will be another folder where it's a folder, and then label will be the main options, and values will be a big array of all of this, right? All of this is inside of this array, the values array, right? So then it will be much easier for us to render the pen sections, right? I can say if it's a folder, I use a folder component. If it's not, then I use like I will look at the type value. If it's a string, I render a string option field, like a text input. If it's a number, I render number input. If it's and if it's a checkbox, I will boolean. A boolean, it will be a checkbox, right? And then a label will be based on the label, and the value will be bind to that value of the input, right? So here in the if it's a folder, here I will do each block to render all the things, right? So I think looking at this, it's quite clear that what we will be rendering, how we can render the sections, right? So before we jump before we write the transformation, since we did transform a few fields, let me just try to copy this and assume we already have the transformation, right? So let me go to the index knobby. Assume based on the options, right, we would need to do like a transform, right? I'm gonna call it description, transform options. Okay, so the function transform. Let's assume we return the whole thing, and now it's returning the results, right? So this is the results we have. It's not the full thing. We still miss a few fields. But let's just try to, okay, I mean, we have a string, we have a number, maybe we have a boolean. Message, this is check, this is boolean, the value is false, right? And lastly, we have a button as well. Maybe just add it in. This is increment. I'm gonna call the type as button. Value will be the function. Yep. So I'm gonna copy all this and paste it in here. Right, so this assumes that we already figure out how to write the transform function. So yeah, let's just assume we already know how to write the transform function. So here what we do first is that we render all the fields first, make sure it works, and then we figure out the transform function later. So I'm gonna save this. let me clean this up. We don't need this anymore. So let's come to the panel. Now sections, here we have our sections already. So we need to loop through, we need to figure, okay, so we need to pass these descriptions. I would say this descriptions is actually the section itself, right? Pass this in. Now this object will be the entire description, right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna create a section component. So it will be a object, right? So here I would, based on the if section dot folder, I will need to render a folder component, right? Else I need to, based on the if section dot type equals to number, I need to do something, right? Let me just open this panel on the side, right? No, I should open this on the side. So we have this whole object which returns from a transform. This whole object is the section, and we pass it to, we add it to the sections list, right? So here in a panel, we import the section component, and we pass that section in to into the section component, and the section component we get this whole object, right? So here we can check whether it's a folder. If it's not, then we will probably it will be this. Right? So this we will do a, let's see whether let me think a bit. Sections, if it's a folder, it will do a folder. I think for sections, it's kind of always known that it will be a folder. So let me just, okay, we just leave this as it is first. So here we need to create a few components, right? With folder components, we have input, boolean and stuff. I think it's easier to make each of them as a component rather than write this folder thing out in the section component, right? So here, this is a folder. It's a folder. Probably we'll take in the whole object over here. Maybe we spread this whole thing where we have export let label, and we have values, right? Export let values. Here I would say, let's see. Here I will use the each values as value. I'll render everything back to the section component. Section value. Right. So section is a way, yeah, I think we are quite messy over here. I was thinking section would be a place where we okay, stretch everything. So first of all, we have a panel with a section component. Okay, section, we can assume it's always a folder first. So here, we just gonna render a folder with the section. Okay, so folder itself can be a folder or more folders. What am I trying to say? Folders here, we have the, whoops. So folder here, import folder. We have the label and the values, right? So we can render a label or a value. Values itself would be either, again, a folder or other fields, right? So here, let me just to do first. Okay,
I think we are quite messy over here right now. Let's see. This is a panel. Okay. So first thing is we create a folder first, right? So for folder, you see here it can be collapsible, right? And one quick way of thinking of doing this is using a HTML element called details. So this details, it has you can add a summary element in it. So summary would be the summary itself. So which is like when you collapse what you will see here. So here I will say label, and then the details itself will be the content, right? So here you see the main options, and then you see all the to-dos. Okay, so here it could be if value.folder is true, then it's a folder, right? Meaning I will render myself again with all the why is this autocomplete so weird? Okay, value, right? If it's not, then I would need to check what's the type, right? So if let me create the component first. We have the string field, export, so script export let's value, and then maybe a label. So we have label, and then we have inputs type string. Actually, this is a default, so that's just like bind value, and that's it. Okay. Let's copy paste a few times. We have a number field. So number, just make sure the type is a number, and then we have a Boolean field. For this one, it's a type is a checkbox, and we bind check to the value. And what else? We have a button field. Button would be a button itself with the label inside the button. And on click is clicking the value, which just now we see that the value is the function, right? And what else do we have? Let's see. We have the number string. Okay, so we could have color field. It's more like a number field. Let me copy this. So a color field, this will be type color. And yeah, for number, if it's a number, it could be a range, or it could be just a free number input, right? So meaning we would have other options over here. Let's get back to where's our index. Okay, here we have min, max, and step. Right. Oops, let me quickly add this. So if we can check that, so the options are created once you create this new section, right? So I could say is range as a reactive variable, checking that maybe if type of min is undefined. So I could make this a dynamic variable, reactive variable, where every time min, max, step, when there's a new value, we need to check whether it's a range, and then we decide whether we, if it's a range, we use a range input. If it's not, we are using a normal input. But I think we don't have to do this. We can make it a constant, because when we play around, we realize that once we create this input, there's no way to modify the options, whether add more fields and things like that. So this is created on initialization once, and then that's it. You don't change the options of the inputs, right? So we can use a constant over here. So if it's a range, what we need to do is we use a range input. Right? Type equals to range. Then I have a min. So this also I don't need to bind, because again, they're not going to change. Yeah. Okay. Number field. I think we are all covered. So here and come back to my panel. Where's my section? No, folder. Here I will say else. Now here, if this is a value.type, oops, equals to number, then I'm going to use a number field, and I'm going to spread, oops, all the value in over here. And if, okay, and I need the else if, oops, value.type equals to string. And I'm going to use a string field. And same thing, if it's a boolean, I need to use a boolean field. Oops, where's the, okay. And if it's a color, I use the color field. And if it's a, what's the last thing? Button, I would have my button. So let's take a look. Yep, we have everything. Button, we have everything. I think what we are lacking is make sure everything renders in one line, right? So here I can wrap every line with a div. Just a quick way. Okay, maybe no. I think I should let the component itself decides, right? So here I think this div needs a new line. String field needs it too. Boolean field as well. Color field. A button. Okay, so now, yep, this is my options. I can expand, right? I have buttons, all this. Okay, that's great. So now, let's see. Now we have. So here it's kind of a bit messy in some way that I need to if else a lot of times, right? So as a different way of doing this would be use a svelte component, right? So if I have something like this component map that tells me based on which type I need to use which component, then I can use a svelte component. This equals to the component map of the value.type, and value in, right? Then I can replace all the if else with all of this with what I have over here, right? That will be something cleaner, I would say. So let me quickly create that map. Let me use some cheat code. Here, I'm gonna replace this. Oops. Okay. So component map. Let's see. Yep. Now, if I refresh, you realize that this, whoa, component map value.type, not values. Refresh. Yep, it still works. Now it looks slightly cleaner over here like this, right? There's also an alternative of not doing this component map over here, which is in the transform. Over here, maybe we can have another field called component, and this is where you use a button component directly, right? You can have your component directly in the transform object as well, and then you use, like, say, maybe value.component to it over here rather than having a component map, right? That would be an alternative, right? It's up to you. This is what we chose to do here. Then This is what we'll have to do with. Okay, so now we have our components. Next thing is, of course, this is a mock transform options. We need to figure out how to actually transform the options to what we have over here, right? But at least we get this options field done. Right now, let's again side by side. This is, let me swap the position a bit, right? So this is the inputs, right? Label, message, and stuff, and this is what the output we want to look like. Right. So first of all, it will be let me create an object called result. So it will be an object, and next is that it would be, it will be, so these options, we call these options with this whole object, and I think we can also call it with the value, each of the value over here, right? So if I check if the type, right? So that if I get the type of the options, if it's string, then I will return something like the string that looks like here, right? So I don't have a label. I don't know about the label, so I'm just gonna ignore for now. So, but I have a type equals to string. So this will be the type, and value will be the options. Okay. Else if type equals to the number, I think same thing. Type is the number, value is the options. Right. Okay, so string, there's two cases actually. It's either a color or normal string. So here if if the options first character is a hash, I'm gonna treat type equals to color. Okay. So number is the same thing. I think Boolean is the same thing. Boolean, we don't know anything. And what else? And then we could have a function, right? So else if type is a function, then type is actually a button. Then let's see, we have an object. So object is the last thing we're gonna deal with. Type equals to object. So object, there's two kinds. It's either a folder or if it's not, right? So let is folder equals, okay, let me just, where if we have value in the object itself, options, right? If you have a value, then it's not a folder, right? So if is folder or it's not a folder, then actually I realized this, we haven't used this at all, right? If it's not a folder, let's do that first. If it's not a folder, return type equals to whatever this type is, right? So whatever it is, I think we can use a transform to do it for us first. So I'm gonna call this result equals to transform options.value. And then what we're going to return is we're going to map this out and also add more other fields over here, right? So it could have a label field, right? So if result, if options.label, then result.label equals to the options.label. Okay, that's definitely a cleaner way of doing this, but I'm just right as we go. So here we need to spread through the other options as well. So let's see. For const key in options. Lastly, I'm going to return the result. Okay. So for each of the other options, I think if key is not, or rather if key is the value or the key is the label, we can ignore because we already handled that. And then the rest will be, we just add it directly to the results object, right? So we handle a non-folder case. Now lastly is the folder, right? Folder will be return, it's a folder, it's true. And label, again, is based on the label object of the options. So let's assume every time we have options.label, every time it's there, label, and then we have values, right? So values itself, we have to loop through all of the keys and then transform them and then add it to the value, right? So I think we can make this a result first, and then we return result. And here for const key in the options, if key equals to, I think label we can ignore, return, continue, sorry. And else we're gonna, this is the child that we call transform with options.key. And this return object, this is the return object. And if the return object child dot label is not there, so it could have label, it could not have, right? So for example, on this case, because we set the return object has the label on it, then we already have a label. But if it does not have label, so type of is undefined. If it does not have any label, then we use the key itself as a label. So child.label equals to the key, right? And then we add this result.values.push child. Okay, and then lastly we return the result. So now we have, I think we have everything. I guess here else case we can throw new error unsupported type. What's that? Type. Okay, so it could still be big in symbol and undefined, right? Based on TypeScript. So yeah, unless we want to handle begin as a number, I think let's just leave it like this, okay? Try refresh. What's happening? With an unsupported type, undefined. So we probably have called, so let's see, transform. Panel options, okay. So probably we have called transform with something that is undefined. So options dot, it's either this or it's either here, options dot value. I'm not sure either case, so I'm just gonna print out options dot value or options key. Options value is undefined. Value in options. Wait, if it's folder. Man, if it's folder, it's does not have value in options. Okay, think we are good except assignment to constant variable. Where this deadline? Type. Okay, so type has to be a let variable. Let's try and see. Okay, now we dynamically create this folder based on the options that we pass in the Svelte panel, right? You see that all the fields, labels, everything are correct right now, except that, so now we able to dynamically render an options. We can play around with it. You have range, you have color, picker, and all this stuff. But what we don't have yet is return a correct store value based on all the things that you do, the options. Oh, so now that's the next step, right? We need to get all this value, become a store, a writable store that returns, which when we change the value over here, it should update the writable store value as well. So how are we gonna do that? Let's figure it out. So first of all, let's clean this thing up. So first of all, this where's our svelte-knobby? Okay. First of all, we need to have a reference of this writable in a way where we can update this writable store, right? So these sections, we need some way that for this section we need to let me try to rephrase what I'm trying to say. Right, this section is the object that we see over here, right? And we render the panel based on this object. So actually if you notice, I'm not sure whether you notice, if I come over here in number field, so this value somewhere in this value, right, is referring to one of the value of this whole object, right? The object that we return over here. So if we bind it value, maybe somehow we are updating the value of this object, right? So if we make this section object a writable section, a writable store, then here what we need is we need to subscribe to this section store and then update the store that we are returning, right? So the gist is like this. So if we're able to make this whole store, section store, and we, instead of pushing a normal section, we push normal object, we push the store inside, right? And here, so writable, the callback function, there's the first variable is called a set, which is to set the value of the store. Here we can subscribe to this section store, subscribe. So this section value, and somehow based on this section value, we can set a new value to the so I would say collect value equals to collect value from the section, because here you see we transform this into a object, right? And this object, again, we need to transform this object back to a store, right? We don't need all this type, value, or whatever. We will type, label, and stuff. We don't really need them. What we need is the value itself. So we need to find a way to transform it back. So here set is the collect value would be a way to transform that back, and then we set the value of the store that we return to, right? So collect value is a function that we will have to implement. And at this point, I'm gonna just return an empty object for now, right? To do. Okay, so section store. So we change it to a store over here, right? So which means we have a lot of things to change, right? Here, this is section is a store now. So I need to so section takes in a store now. So here you need to spread it as a store, right? So folder section. Yeah, let's see whether it works. And folder, so to know whether it works first, let's come over here and console log section. Okay. So I think we need some binding somewhere, right? So this section, we are going to the, so this, we need some binding in some place, right? Well, let me think. Quick. This is, okay, I know. I think we don't need this folder component for now. Let's make this simpler. Panel. I just need a folder. And the folder is having label and values. Okay, I'm gonna create. I am. Quick. Let me think. Okay, I'm gonna call this. Okay, let me make some changes. Okay, so this is the folder.label. This is a star. And then this is the folder.values. So the reason is I need to do a binding, okay? And I need to pass this section as the whole thing in because I can't I need to bind something. I need to bind the values to the section dot values over here. Actually, what I need to do is do this, right? But this is something that we can't do because we can't subscribe. For now, there's a limitation that section itself has to be top, cannot be coming from each block. It has to be a top level variable. So a quick around for this is I'm just passing the whole section down to the folder, and then I subscribe to this store in the folder component, right? And secondly, I need a bind, right? Binding, which means that if I change the value from inside, like I change the values from here, this will update this variable itself. So it's a, wait, let me think. Do I need to? Actually, I don't need to. I don't need a bind because this itself is a store. Anything I change will change the store directly, right? I don't need to sync up back one more level, right? So from here, folder, what I need is I need to also update this self now. So this would be value dot folder equals to value. Right, but in this case, I need to do a binding because I need to update because this is no longer the store. This is just a normal object that is part of the store. So I need to bind and update back to the value of the store, right? So every time if I inside it I change the value of this folder variable, you will see when I would change it, right? Because folder I would also if I change the folder variable inside this inner folder component, I want it to get noticed, and then I would have to bind it back to this variable. So this is man, I'm making this all too confusing. I think because now this could be a store, this could be not a store. I think that's why I need a section over here. Right. Okay, so this is how it gets when we're doing like a semi-live coding. This is part of this video where you get to see me figure things out together. I'm planned for. Okay, so now we have a folder. Okay, let's get back to section. So section gets the whole section star. Okay, and this is a star. So we want to have some sort of binding over here, right? So label can be the section, not label, but we also need to bind something, which is a value. Values equals to section. So this is the key. We need some sort of binding so that whenever we change the values inside this folder component, it updates back to this section store, so that this store value is always updated. So if we come down to the folder component, let's get back to this labels and values. So label is still simple. Values. So here previously we were doing the spreading, right? Where we spread the whole value. We could still do that, but one thing we need to take note is that the values we need to bind. Values into bind value.values. Okay. So this is the key. We need to bind the values such that, because values is where we have all the different options, right? And so whenever we change something inside, we need to bind back here, bind the values back to this value object. And then because this value comes from, when we look through this, comes from the values, and this values again was bind to here, right? So that this will update this section of values. So this section store will get updated. So same thing comes over here. We can spread everything, but because each of them has one thing called value field, which is something we need to bind, right? So bind value to value.value, I think, right? So this is important. We need to bind it back again to the value.value, right? So here, if I refresh, let's see our console log. Every time we change something, you need to see that because of all the bindings that we have, this is updated, right? So it flows like this. This is the store. We bind the values, we bind this value array to the inner component, which is a folder. And folder itself is re-render itself. It has to bind the values to itself again, right? So and then if we have fields, we have to bind the value of that component to this value here. So here goes to the values array, which is bind in the section, right? It could be a nested folder, so it binds to this value, and then this value binds again to the parents folder's values, and then to the section. So everything binds back to here, right? If I don't do a bind, say for example, I don't do a bind, I just do normal value, and I don't even need to do this because I already have a spread. You realize that if I change something, nothing happened, right? Because we are not binding back. So we just change a local variable, even though of the input, right? And yeah, so even though if we come over here, if we have like a string field, we have a bind of this value, we bind update this props. You probably would notice if I come over here, console values. Let's see. I think I can set set interval console log values. Right. I can't do a reactive declaration because again, because of no binding, nothing happens. But I can do a set interval of say 1 second apart to keep looking at these values, right? What my point here is that I can change this to be Q, and now you see that somehow, somewhere, this is, whoops, okay, here, this message is still not updated. Let me try and look at the latest one. It's still not, yeah, it's still not updated because we passed the string value in, right? It's not binding, so it does not updates back to the array itself, the values array itself, right? So yeah, so you need a binding, right? So everything works with the bind. You bind all the way down, and then so everything changes, propagates slowly up, all the way up. So yeah, I can demo this again. Like if I miss out these values, you realize that changing nested fields has no effect at all. If I add this bind, now folder values will bind back to the parent. Now if I change inner folder, you'll see that you will update back. So the last one is a folder. You realize that this binds back, right? So now we have this, right? We have this object. You need to collect back to the collect it back to become an object that we set to the store, and then you will see it here, right? I think one thing now I realize is that we don't have the key of the object that we add to the return object, right? So we have label that overrides the key, right? In this case, we can have customized label like label input, but again, we need to update back to a variable called constraint. But we lose this constraint somewhere when we override with a label, right? I think so. Now for each of them, here we need to add this thing called let's see. I think we still need to add a child key equals to key. I think that's all we need. Okay, so at least we know the key itself, right? So here, if you take a look what we have now, refresh. Oops. Because we removed the console. Okay, let me lock section. So if I change something, you see that we have folders, values, and then we have key message. And I think the most important one is this number over here, where label is a label input, but the key is the constraint. All right, so now we need to take this whole thing, copy object, all this whole thing, and we need to transform back to, we need to transform it to become like this. I won't say back because it's not transformed back to this object also, but it will become something like where it's folder name is an object, and then it has its values where key will be message and the value will be the hello world with a 1, 2, right? Key is the color, and then label, the value will be this color itself, right? If you're interested to try, you can pause this right now and figure out how to write this. If not, let's continue to write this. So here, let's have this on the side and let's try to write. Okay, right? So if section is folder is true, then we can have a result equals to object, and we need to return the result object. I think it's always going to be a folder, so let's... Okay, now, I mean, if it's not a folder, then probably it's something like this, then I'm going to return the section.value, right? So for result, then we need to look through the values array for value of values array, and then each of them actually I don't need a value. Wait, let me think. I think value. If value okay, gonna do a recursive, right? Value dot no. Okay, so if value.folder is a folder, then I need to collect the value of the inner folder, child folder, and then results.key, right? This has a key, will equals to my child folder. Right? Else, then result key will be equals to the value.key will be equals to value.value, right? That's it. And lastly, we make sure return result, and we've done that. And I think that's it. Let's try refresh this whole thing. Ref values not defined. Okay. Section.values. And that's it. You start to see values coming out from the store already. If I change hello world to something else, it's updating. And if I change the color, it's updating the store real time. If I try to update the clicks number, it's updating.
checkbox is working. And then now I see inner sections. Hold on, I think I need to add some border around section so that you can div. Okay, let me style this. Div border. Padding 4 pixel. Right, so there's 2 sections now. Oops, hot remote loading, screwing up. So if I check this, you'll see more or less options. If I expand, I can change this as well. It goes real time, updating all my stars. That's great, amazing. What does label input controls? I'm not sure. Why does label input? I don't think it controls any constraint. It's not controlling anything. Okay, let me maybe control something, right? Let's see. Should see this. Okay, just controls constraint. Okay. So if we change our label input, you see that this is updating as well. Okay, now one last thing. This does not work yet. So this button, if you look at this, it takes in the whole values, right? This value is the entirety of this the value of this star, right? So we need to pass it in somehow when we click on the increment button. So that's tricky because we transform and then we create a value. So when we transform it, we really make it like a function, right? We really make it like a we already passed that. Hey, where's our button? Yeah, we already passed that function indirectly, right? So I think here we need to do some trickery over here. I think we can pass in okay, so we can collect the value after that, right? Value. And actually this value can be set as the initial state of the writable star. Okay, then I think here we can have a function called get value. Which is a function that gives us the value, right? This is defined later, but get value can still give us the if we call get value after we define value, so this will still return a valid value, right? I think this should be a let now because this can be updated from inside as well. So this will always give us a latest value object. And here, the trick that we're going to do is we're going to pass this get value in here in the transform, right? So here we have a get value option method, right? I make it an object because who knows what else we need to pass in. Okay, so now we take this in. I think we don't have to destructure because this is easier for config. I'm gonna call it bad naming. Okay. I think I'm too bad at naming the what's gonna be called and just gonna call get value. And for all the transform, I need to pass this thing in as well. Okay, any other transform? Okay, so for the button itself, what we can do is this is a function where we're going to call options, right? And here we can call the get value and return us a value over here, and then we pass into the options. And I'm not sure whether even we need to return this, but let's just do that. Okay, so that's it. So if you are particular on this, let's just make this inline function. Okay, let's save this. Let's refresh. Now we have this, and if we click increment, still nothing happened yet. Let's see what's wrong. Okay, so increments returns a value. Right, this returns this thing returns the latest value. Right, it's like a 2 updates kind of thing, but we need to pass this to set spec to the section star. Ah man, okay, so here again, section star, you don't have a way to set the value, right? Const, I'm gonna do this again, set value equals to value, and I'm gonna section star dot set the value. Right, again, you can't call set value ahead of if we call set value after we declare this, so anywhere here it's gonna work, but you can't call it before because this will still be undefined due to something called a something in variability, something about constant, right? So anyway, I'm gonna pass this set value in here. In my transform now, I need to call set value and get value. Let's see, I've called everywhere. Okay, cool. Now I need to come over here to the here and call set value. Right, so that should work. So it returns a new value and then I call set value. That should work now. Refresh, increment. Ah man, why is it not working? Is there an error? Sections of values is not iterable. Oh wait, no. I'm setting this, right. So this should be, I don't have to collect the value anymore. If I set the value of the section store, then yeah, if I set the value of the section store, then that should be this thing over here. But that's not what we want. We want that's what we set. We set the values, which is, so let me show you what I think I know what happens, right? So here in the set value, if I console log the value, right? If I increment, I set the value of the store, right? This is something actually what we want when we do a collect values, right? So this set the section store, but here when we have the new value, we want to do a collect value, right? Which is kind of wrong, right? Because we already need do the collect value already, and this actually will create other problems, right? So if I do this, you realize that if I increment, everything is gonna screw up because we have this store, we set the value of this store, and this store is the one that we use to render our panel, right? If we go sections, we loop through values and stuff, we do the binding and stuff, right? So we are not, so the store that we're going to change is not this section store, but rather the store that we just returned, right? So to do that, to fix this, we're gonna get a reference of this store. So I'm gonna call it store, because I'm bad at naming, return store. And here I am going to set the store instead of the section store. Right? So let's try refresh and see this increment. It works. Yeah, it works for the first time, but because it does not update back to this panel, right now you see that 0 is here, and now the value of store is still 0 because the way of how we write it, right? Because the way we write this
because the way we write this function is we spread this value and value.clicks, but this value.clicks stays at 0 because updating this store that we return, this store, when the value is changed, this not flow back to the section store and gets back all the values that you see over here, right? So changing from outside, it's not changing back inside, but changing from inside, now we can see that it's changing back out, right? So now internally the section store is value 14. If I increment, it can go to 15. But because we set the outer store, the return store, it does not flow back. So what we have over here, all the values are still at 14. So increment does not work, and this still stays at 14. So this is something we need to fix now. And after this, I think we basically get everything more or less there, right? So here, now we need to figure a way to set the value of the store, right? So the set value of the store is actually this function, right? So store set. Set store value. Okay, so if we're setting the value over here, we want to take the value and then apply back to the objects over here. All right, so I'm going to call it apply value. Apply value, and the value over here, and the section. Section store, because we're going to update the section store. Okay. Set store value will be apply the value, this value. So this value is this return store value, right? And then we try to apply back to the store. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Let's write a function apply value. Apply value, the value and the section store. So we're going to call section store dot update with the section value, and here I think we can loop through the structure itself, and then I think okay. So this is probably going to be a recursive again. But then we are not recursing on the store, we are recursing on the object, right? Because apply value, it takes in a store, right? Okay, we can apply. But then if we want to apply a inner child folder, we're probably going to call apply value again with the child value and the child section. But then this is object, this is not a store. So we can't use the same apply value function again, we need to call a different function. So the only edge case is that the root case is a store. So I think we can do it here. Then apply value, we will apply with a section. Then we can make sure that we can still recurse this apply value function, and we can get these two are just plain objects, right? And I think we want to return this to be the return object of this thing. And actually we are going to mutate this section itself. So I'm going to say return section. So we can mutate and return the same object. Okay, so here apply value, what we're going to do is actually we check if the section is a folder, right? If it's a folder, only we return, right? Because if it's normal, okay, it's still the same. Sorry. It's a folder, then we're gonna loop through the values, value of values. So this values is in the section of values. Okay, so we loop through this section. We look at the key. So this is the value.key. I think we have naming conflict. So this is the section value. Okay, section value.key, which is this message. We need to look up from this value object. So I will say this will be updated based on the value section value.key. Okay. Section value. Okay, so this object, the value of this value field, right here, will be equals to what we are getting from this value with the key, based on this key. But then there's also a case where it's a folder, right? So if it's a folder, then I think we are recursing again. Okay, so we need to refactor this somehow into a recursive function. But if it's a folder, then we are gonna apply value based on what is this? The value. Okay, so based on the value of this section, the key. Alright, so this thing I'm gonna apply based on this section value. Right, we're gonna get the child object and the child section, and we're gonna apply value on both of them. Right. Okay, so it's a bit ugly recursive functions over here. Let me think how I can rewrite this in a nicer way. Okay, so if it's a function, we see this. If you're checking this again, this is something that we're checking the same thing twice, right? Then meaning this itself could be the now this itself could be the recursive function. Okay, so I think I know. Apply value can call with the whole thing, or you could call with all the inner values. Value with the section value. Okay. Yep, that's it. And if it's not a folder, then we know that section.key is something that we need, right? So this is the section. The value will be based on the key. Yep. Now we have a simpler, nicer, right? So we can call with the same value. Wait, I think we still miss out something. It will be else if. So this one section.value is this thing, right? It could still be a folder. It is a folder. Ah, man, what am I doing? Folder. I think I know. So the root folder is a edge case where there's no keys, but the child folder has a key. Right, so this actually, if you apply section values, right, it should be applying to a child object if there's a key. So it's more of like this. If section.key, then it will be value of the section dot key or value. So this one we apply to the child value or the value itself, right? So for the root case, it's using the value, but then for inner child values, like if I'm applying this apply value, when I go loop through the values, one of it is this, then it has a key, then I need to take the value of the section key to do the apply value. So you'll be apply on the inner child, right? Apply value. I think this is it. Yep, set store value. So now I need to take this section store, set store value. I need to call this instead. Okay, let's try refresh. So here, if I increment, it calls this function set store value, which will update our section store, which is the inner store, apply all the value to the values so that this gets applied, right? This gets applied, so now you see 1, right? So I click, it applies to 6, right? So this set store value should also be part of the store that's being returned, right? So here I create a new store. So store needs to have the subscribe method, which is the store contract. So this can come from the store.subscribe, and optionally you can have a set method to update the value of the store. So this is gonna be set store value, right? So 2 methods. Let's refresh. That's it. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Yep, I can update from outside. I can increment. Wait, I don't have a way to update the value of the store from outside. So here I am going to wait. Hold on. Do you see that? Initially it's hello world, but now it's hello knobby because it's updated from outside, right? Yeah, it's actually working. Just to make sure that it works splendidly, I'm gonna bind a value to controls.message. Okay, let me close this. So now if I change this, take a look over here. This is updated. Change from inside, it's updated from outside. Change our outside is updating from inside. So now we have our svelte-knobby. Yeah, we've recreated everything, right? So we start from dynamically rendering the panel when we are subscribing to the store, right? So when a new store is subscribed, there's new section, and then we figure out how we can transform these options that you pass into the svelte-knobby into a description that's easier for us to do the rendering of all these inputs. And then with that, what we do next is that based on that, we're able to get all our inputs now, right? But we have to bind to something and we have to collect all the values into the value of the store. So we did that. So now you see the value of the store. And then we realized that changing the store value from outside or like it does not reflect back to the inner store. So we do that by having our custom set store value function that tries to get the latest value from the outside and apply it back to the inner description of this panel. And now we have changes that applies from both sides, from the outside and inside of the panel. So that's it. Thank you for staying for so far. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any libraries that you're interested to know how it's being implemented, or you want to see how we can implement that library, try to recreate it, comment in the comment section below. Tell me what library you want to figure out and we can try it out together. And that's it. Share this video to your friend and see you in the next video. Bye bye.